ask someone from Rochester if they've ever been to the public market, you'll probably get responses like, "Of course, every week, ever since I was a kid." Continue to ask, and you'll find that the public market has been an old habit in Rochester for many years. But what was it that started this tradition that inspired generations of vendors to wake up at the crack of dawn to sell their goods on the streets of Rochester? Our journey begins in the 19th century, when the Erie Canal was still in only recent construction. There was an increasing need for a distribution center of foods and goods. Come 1827, local citizens worked together to make a marketplace located on a bridge spanning the river. A man named Charles H. Carroll claimed the title of the property and began to lease the rights to rest beams on the West Pier and walls constructed along the river. Other property owners soon followed his example of building wooden platforms on the bridge, and small single-story buildings began to appear. However, in 1834, a fire destroyed most of the frame buildings on the bridge, and instead of rebuilding them, the city decided to move the market to a larger space a block north of the Main Street Bridge. Once completed, the new Market Street Bridge attracted new property owners looking to build in the space connecting Andrews and Mumford Street. But their hopes for economic success would be washed away in 1835 when a severe flood would wipe out the bridge on Market Street. It's worth noting that both the first and second marketplaces were both enclosed. For a short period, local militia units would use the north wing of the market for drilling, but in 1850 newly formed police forces displaced them, moving in and setting up a headquarters with a small wing just as a jail. Despite the heavy amount of traffic that the market attracted, it did hold an evident structure. The fishmongers took place in the basement, butchers could be found on the ground floors, and vegetable vendors were mainly occupying the outside. With the increase in traffic, farmers who parked their wagons along the south side of the Main Street Bridge were criticized, and the city bought an adjacent lot from the market specifically for parking. A cow alley originally brought livestock to and from the center of Rochester in the early days when it was not yet considered a city. As the community expanded, craftsmen saw the alley as a prime real estate opportunity and built their businesses on top of it. The increase in human traffic displaced the farmers, and the alley was soon renamed Work Street. The transformation of Work Street is a good example of the growing gap in class during this time period. It was becoming evident to farmers that they were no longer welcome in the city, and the affluent upper class had no intention of changing this message. Later, in 1905, the public market had to change again, and moved to Union Street to accommodate for growing populations in the city. This marketplace was open daily, but the most traffic arrived on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. The new market had a capacity of 1,200 wagons and several thousand people, but by the 1920s, it had already been overgrown. City planners were calling for new parking areas and traffic control methods to manage the large number of visitors. By the way, I never introduced myself. I am Sam Ollis, also known as the Banana King. I was just a small fruit merchant in the public market, but I was a respected businessman in the Italian Rochester community. You see, that meant something in the July of 1908, because farmers were being extorted. Victims would receive threatening letters, bodily harm, kidnapping, arson, murder, you name it, we got it. The letters would be decorated in these threatening symbols, like a smoking gun, a hangman's noose. Something that was always consistent is they were always signed in black ink with a handprint, thus the name Black Hand Extortion. As things continued, it slowly got worse. In 1911, my own nephew, Antonio Ollis, was murdered by the Black Hand, but it didn't stop there. In fact, it got worse. In October, they found Francesco Monzola, my own employee, chopped up in a barrel along the road outside of Rochester, just down the street in Webster. The boys in blue didn't help. In fact, they thought I was the culprit, since I had connections to both of them. Ends up, Antonio was also my rival when he was just a good friend. A good friend I wanted to keep close at all times. But that's just conspiracy, just trivia, rumors really. Nothing was ever proven, and I lived out my days. Besides, that's just ancient history. In fact, everything I've just told you is history. There are plans nowadays to renovate the public market to expand it even bigger than my time even. But I hope next time you walk down the public market, you can remember everything I've told you, and you can see just how much it's changed, how it's grown over the years. But that's it for me. Signing off, Mr. Alice.